The notification buzzed my phone at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night. I almost ignored it, thinking it was another spam message. But something made me glance at the screen. The text from my mother, Patricia, read like a death sentence. "We've agreed you're no longer part of the family. Don't come to any gatherings, including Grandma Dorothy's 90th birthday next weekend. This decision is final." Before I could even process the words, I watched my sister Sarah's name appear below the message with a heart emoji reaction. She actually liked it. My hands trembling, I typed back through the rage building in my chest. "Thanks for confirming what I always suspected. I'll cancel all the auto payments tonight." I hit send at exactly 12:03 a.m., and within seconds my phone started ringing. The family meeting they held without me was about my refusal to give my brother Jake another $15,000 for his latest failed business venture. I had quietly supported this family for 5 years, paying mortgages and insurance premiums, while they criticized every boundary I tried to set. Tonight, they finally showed their true colors. As Patricia's panicked voice filled my voicemail asking me to call back immediately, I realized they were about to learn exactly how much their independence was going to cost them. The irony wasn't lost on me that the same people who voted me out were about to discover just how essential I had become to their comfortable lives. 5 years ago, when Dad passed away from a sudden heart attack at 58, I stepped up without hesitation. At 23, fresh out of college with my accounting degree, I moved back home to help Mom navigate the maze of insurance claims, mortgage payments, and medical bills that Dad's death had left behind. What started as temporary assistance gradually became permanent dependency, though nobody in my family would ever admit that. Every month, $650 automatically transferred from my checking account to cover Mom's mortgage payment. Another $200 went towards Sarah's health insurance premiums because her part-time job at the daycare center didn't offer benefits for her twin daughters, Emma and Chloe. Jake's car payment ate up another $325 monthly, along with his auto insurance at $160. I had set up an emergency fund that I contributed $400 to each month, money that somehow always got spent on Jake's various business ventures or Mom's unexpected expenses. The worst part wasn't the money itself. I made decent income as a senior accountant at Morrison and Associates, pulling in $75,000 a year after taxes. The crushing weight came from how invisible my sacrifices had become. When Jake bought his girlfriend Lisa expensive jewelry, nobody questioned where his disposable income originated. When Mom redecorated the living room with new furniture, she never acknowledged that my mortgage payments freed up her Social Security check for such luxuries. Sarah took her daughters on weekend trips to theme parks, never mentioning that my insurance contributions made their medical care affordable. 3 months ago, everything started falling apart when Jake approached me about investing in a food truck business with his buddy Marcus. He needed $15,000 for his share of the initial investment, promising to pay me back within 6 months, once the profits started rolling in. I had learned from his previous ventures that Jake's enthusiasm far exceeded his business acumen. The photography studio that lasted 8 weeks. The lawn care service that folded after he forgot to service 3 major clients during a playoff weekend. The online retail store that never sold a single item. When I declined to fund the food truck, Jake's attitude shifted dramatically. He started making snide comments about my selfishness during family dinners. Mom began questioning why I was so stingy when the family needed help. Sarah suggested I was becoming controlling and manipulative with money. The tension built week after week until tonight's nuclear option. As 12:30 a.m. approached, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open, systematically accessing every account where I had set up automatic payments for my family. The mortgage protection plan that covered Mom's house payment in case of emergency canceled. Sarah's health insurance premium scheduled to process tomorrow canceled. Jake's car payment due in 3 days canceled. The emergency fund that had bailed them out countless times, account closed. My phone buzzed with another frantic call from Mom, then Sarah, then Jake. I let them all go to voicemail feeling strangely calm as I watched 5 years of financial entanglement dissolve with a few clicks. They wanted independence from me. They were about to get exactly what they asked for. But as I canceled the last payment, something nagging pulled at my conscience. I opened Jake's social media profiles, something I rarely did anymore. His recent posts showed expensive dinners at upscale restaurants, tickets to sporting events, and photos from weekend gambling trips to the local casino. For someone supposedly struggling to start a legitimate business, Jake seemed to have plenty of money for entertainment. A sick feeling settled in my stomach as I realized where my previous loans to him might have actually gone. The revelation hit me like a sledgehammer. Jake had been lying about his business failures all along. He had been using my money to fuel a gambling addiction while spinning elaborate stories about entrepreneurial bad luck. $15,000 would never go toward a food truck. It would disappear into poker tables and slot machines just like every other dollar I'd ever given him. My family hadn't just dismissed me tonight. They had been systematically deceiving me for months, maybe years. My alarm went off at 6:30 Wednesday morning, but I had barely slept. The voicemail notifications on my phone had reached double digits overnight, growing increasingly desperate as the hours passed. Mom's first message at 12:15 was angry and accusatory. By 4 a.m., her tone had shifted to pleading panic. The 8th floor office at Morrison & Associates felt like a sanctuary as I settled into my cubicle, grateful for the normalcy of spreadsheets and tax codes. But my reprieve lasted exactly 47 minutes before my desk phone rang with an outside call. Patricia's voice cracked through the speaker, barely recognizable. "Ronald, honey, please pick up. I know you're there. We need to talk about last night. I think there was a misunderstanding." "No, there was no misunderstanding," I replied calmly, keeping my voice low to avoid attracting attention from my coworkers. "You made your position crystal clear. I'm simply respecting your wishes for independence. But the mortgage payment..." Her words trailed off as reality sank in. The automatic transfer that had quietly protected her home for 60 consecutive months was no longer there. Tomorrow's scheduled payment would bounce, triggering late fees and starting a countdown toward potential foreclosure proceedings. "That's no longer my concern, Patricia. You're a capable adult who made a conscious decision. I'm sure you'll figure out alternative arrangements." The formality of using her first name instead of Mom sent a clear signal that our relationship had fundamentally changed. "Don't be vindictive, Ronald. This isn't like you. We were upset about Jake's situation, but cutting off the family financially is cruel and manipulative. Your father would be ashamed of this behavior." The comment about Dad hit exactly as intended, but instead of guilt, it sparked cold fury. Dad would be ashamed that his son spent 5 years sacrificing his own life to support people who never once expressed gratitude. Dad would be disgusted that his family held secret meetings to vote out the one person keeping everyone afloat. But most of all, Dad would be heartbroken that his wife used his memory as a weapon against his son. I hung up and immediately called our IT department to have my desk phone number changed. Word would spread quickly that I was dealing with family drama, but at least the interruptions would stop. Lunch break brought a surprise visitor to the office lobby. Sarah stood near the security desk, bouncing nervously while holding her phone. Her usual confident demeanor had crumbled into raw desperation. She looked like she hadn't slept, either dark circles prominent under her eyes. "Ronald, thank goodness, we need to talk privately. It's about Emma's surgery." My niece Emma, 8 years old with Sarah's bright smile, was scheduled for a minor procedure to correct a heart murmur next week. The surgery itself was routine, but the hospital required proof of active insurance coverage before admitting pediatric patients. We found an empty conference room where Sarah broke down completely. "The insurance company called this morning. They said my coverage lapsed because the premium payment was declined. Emma's surgery is scheduled for Tuesday, and without insurance, They want $18,000 up front. I don't have that kind of money, Ronald. I barely have $1,800 in my checking account. Did you explain this to Mom and Jake before last night's vote? They said we could work out the insurance problem later. Jake promised he would help cover Emma's medical bills if needed. But when I called him this morning, he said his situation is complicated right now and he can't access any funds. What exactly is Jake's complicated situation? Sarah hesitated, clearly wrestling with family loyalty versus her daughter's welfare. He owes some people money. I don't know details, but he seemed scared when I pressed him about it. He said the food truck investment was supposed to solve his problems, not create new ones. So everyone knew Jake was in financial trouble, but you still expected me to give him $15,000. We hoped, if you helped him this one time, he could get back on his feet and start contributing to the family again. The rationalization was breathtaking in its selfishness. They had planned to use my money to bail out Jake's gambling debts while disguising it as a business investment. When I refused to enable the deception, they cut me off completely, apparently never considering how their decision would affect an 8-year-old girl's medical care. My afternoon became a series of increasingly frantic calls from family members. Patricia called my direct supervisor, claiming there was a family emergency that required my immediate attention. Sarah showed up at the office again, this time with both daughters in tow, hoping to leverage my emotional connection to the girls. Jake left a voicemail that started apologetic, but quickly turned threatening when he realized I wasn't planning to return his call. But the most disturbing revelation came at 6 p.m. when I arrived home to find Jake sitting on my apartment building's front steps. His bloodshot eyes and disheveled appearance suggested he had been drinking heavily. As I approached the entrance, he stood unsteadily and blocked my path. "We need to settle this right now, Ronald. You can't just abandon the family because your feelings got hurt. People are depending on that money, and you're being a selfish piece of garbage." "Move away from the door, Jake. I'm not discussing this with you while you're intoxicated." "I'm not intoxicated. I'm desperate. Do you understand what happens when you don't pay certain types of people back on time? Do you have any idea what kind of pressure I'm under because you decided to throw a tantrum?" The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. Jake wasn't just gambling recreationally. He was in debt to dangerous people who expected payment on schedule. The food truck story was a desperate attempt to secure enough money to satisfy his creditors and maybe have enough left over to continue gambling. My refusal hadn't just hurt his feelings. It had potentially put him in physical danger. But instead of sympathy, I felt only anger at being manipulated through fear tactics. Jake had created this mess through his own choices. The fact that those choices now threatened his safety didn't obligate me to become his perpetual rescuer. That sounds like a personal problem you'll need to solve personally, Jake. Now move away from the door before I call building security. His response shocked me. Building security. What about family security? What about loyalty? We've been talking to relatives, Ronald. Everyone knows what kind of person you really are now. Controlling, manipulative, selfish. Aunt Linda agrees with us. Cousin Michael thinks you've lost your mind. Even Grandma Dorothy is disappointed in your behavior. The casual mention of extended family involvement felt like another punch to the gut. Not only had they voted me out of the immediate family, they had been conducting a character assassination campaign with relatives who only heard their version of events. My reputation within the broader family network was being systematically destroyed based on lies and manipulation. As Jake finally stumbled away from the entrance, muttering threats under his breath, I realized the situation was far more complicated than a simple family disagreement. This was warfare, and I was fighting people who had no intention of playing fairly. Thursday morning brought an unexpected phone call that changed everything. Grandma Dorothy's voice, sharp despite her 89 years, cut through the receiver at 7:15 a.m. "Ronald, dear, I received the strangest bill yesterday from Sunset Manor. They're asking for payment on my assisted living account, but I thought you handled those arrangements. Has something changed?" My grandmother's monthly care costs ran $2,800 money. I had quietly managed for 3 years since her mild stroke made financial tasks difficult. The automatic payment was scheduled to process Friday, but like all the others, I had canceled it Tuesday night. There have been some family changes, Grandma. I'm no longer handling financial matters for everyone. What kind of family changes? Patricia mentioned you were going through a difficult phase, but she didn't provide specifics. The careful phrasing triggered my suspicions. What exactly did Mom tell you about our situation? She called Monday evening very upset, said you had decided to distance yourself from the family and were refusing to help with various expenses. She asked if I agreed that sometimes adult children need tough love to learn responsibility. I assumed she was referring to one of Jake's situations, so I said whatever she thought was best. My blood ran cold. Grandma, did Mom tell you they were cutting me out of family gatherings? Did she mention anything about Grandma Dorothy's 90th birthday party? The silence stretched uncomfortably long before Dorothy replied. She said you were too busy with work to attend family events anymore, that you felt the obligations were becoming burdensome, and you wanted more independence. I was disappointed, but I understand how overwhelming life can become for young people. The manipulation was even more sophisticated than I had realized. Patricia had presented my grandmother with a completely fabricated version of events, making it sound like I was the one choosing distance rather than being forcibly excluded. She had secured Dorothy's apparent agreement to their actions without ever explaining what those actions actually entailed. Grandma, would you be available to meet for lunch today? I think we need to have a detailed conversation about what's really happening. 2 hours later, I sat across from Dorothy at her favorite restaurant, a quiet diner near Sunset Manor that served her beloved apple pie. As I carefully explained the actual sequence of events from the past 3 months, her expression shifted from confusion to concern to unmistakable anger. Let me understand this correctly, she said, her voice gaining strength with each word. You've been supporting Patricia's mortgage for 5 years. You've paid for Sarah's insurance and Jake's car. You've contributed to an emergency fund that they've used multiple times. And when you declined to give Jake $15,000 for a questionable business venture, they held a secret meeting to ban you from family events. That's accurate. And they told you I was choosing to distance myself rather than being excluded. Dorothy's hands shook slightly as she reached for her purse, pulling out a small leather notebook where she kept important information. Patricia asked me to sign a document Monday night. She said it was a family agreement about financial responsibilities and boundaries. I signed it without reading carefully because I trusted her explanation. Do you remember what the document said? Something about supporting independent decision-making and not enabling unhealthy dependency patterns. Patricia said it was therapeutic language recommended by a family counselor to help everyone develop healthier relationships. The depth of the deception was staggering. Patricia had manipulated an elderly woman into signing a document that apparently formalized my exclusion from the family, all while presenting it as beneficial therapy for my supposed problems. Grandma, there's something else you should know about Jake's financial situation. I gently explained my suspicions about his gambling addiction and the real reason he needed $15,000 so urgently. Dorothy listened without interruption, her expression growing darker with each detail. When I finished, she closed her notebook decisively and looked directly into my eyes. Ronald, I need to tell you something I've been planning to discuss with you privately. Something that makes this situation even more serious than you realize. She paused to ensure we wouldn't be overheard, then continued in a lower voice. 3 years ago, when I moved to Sunset Manor, Patricia convinced me to transfer the family home into her name for tax purposes. She said it would protect the property from estate taxes and make inheritance simpler when the time comes. But legally, I retained life estate rights, which means I still own the house until I die. What does that mean practically? It means I can revoke her ownership at any time if I determine the property is being misused or if she fails to honor our agreement. Part of our agreement was that the house would remain a gathering place for all family members and that no one would be excluded from family events held there. The implications hit me immediately. Patricia had violated the terms of their arrangement by banning me from family gatherings, including events held at the house. Dorothy had legal grounds to reclaim the property if she chose to exercise those rights. There's more, Dorothy continued. I've been saving money specifically to leave you a substantial inheritance because I know how much you've sacrificed for this family. You've shown more integrity and responsibility than anyone else, and I want to make sure you're rewarded for your character. My will currently leaves you the house, my investment accounts, and my life insurance policy. The total value is approximately $420,000. I nearly choked on my coffee. Grandma, I had no idea. I planned to tell you on my 90th birthday. I wanted to make the announcement in front of the whole family, so there would be no surprises or disputes later. But now I'm wondering if Patricia and Jake's behavior toward you might be connected to their knowledge of my estate plans. How would they know? Last month, Patricia offered to help me organize my important papers. She said she wanted to make sure everything was properly documented in case of emergency. I showed her my will and the property documents thinking transparency would prevent problems later. The final pieces of the puzzle fell into place with sickening clarity. Patricia and Jake knew about Dorothy's inheritance plans. They understood that alienating me could jeopardize their own financial futures if Dorothy decided to change her will. But they also knew that Jake's gambling debts had reached a crisis point that required immediate action. Their strategy was devastatingly simple. Eliminate me from the family before Dorothy's birthday announcement, then use emotional manipulation to convince her that I had abandoned everyone. If they could permanently damage my relationship with Dorothy, they might be able to influence her to change her estate plans in their favor. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Your brother owes us $37,000. Payment due Friday, or we collect through alternative methods. Family property makes good collateral. Jake's creditors were threatening the house that Dorothy still legally owned. The house she planned to leave to me. The house where Patricia lived under an agreement she had already violated by excluding me from family events. As I drove Dorothy back to Sunset Manor, she made a request that would change everything. Call my attorney Harold Brennan and schedule a meeting for tomorrow. Tell him we need to discuss revoking a property transfer and making changes to estate documents. It's time to protect what needs protecting. Friday morning arrived with 3 missed calls from Patricia and a string of increasingly desperate text messages. By 10 a.m., she had resorted to calling my office directly demanding to speak with me about what she termed a family emergency. My supervisor, Ellen Martinez, approached my desk with obvious concern. Ronald, I've had multiple calls this morning from someone claiming to be your mother. She's insisting there's been a death in the family and that you need to leave work immediately. However, she became evasive when I asked for specific details about funeral arrangements or which relative had passed away. Is there something I should know about your situation? The lie about a family death crossed a line that demonstrated how desperate Patricia had become. Using fictitious tragedy to manipulate my employer showed she was willing to damage my professional reputation to get what she wanted. Ellen, there's no death in the family. There is an ongoing dispute about financial matters and some family members are trying to pressure me into meeting their demands. I apologize for the disruption to the workplace. I've changed my desk phone number and blocked their personal contact information, but they may continue trying to reach me here. So, would you like to speak with HR about getting a restraining order? We have resources available if you're dealing with harassment. The suggestion hadn't occurred to me, but given Jake's threatening behavior and Patricia's escalating tactics, legal protection might become necessary. Let me handle things personally first. If the situation continues affecting my work environment, I'll definitely explore that option. Lunch break brought another unwelcome surprise. As I walked through the office building lobby toward the parking garage, Sarah and Patricia emerged from behind a pillar near the elevators. Sarah looked exhausted and stressed, but Patricia appeared almost manic with determination. "Ronald, we need to talk immediately," Patricia announced loudly enough to draw attention from other people in the lobby. "This nonsense has gone on long enough. You're destroying the family over money, and it needs to stop right now." Several co-workers from other companies in the building turned to stare at the confrontation. My professional image was being damaged in real time by people who had no concern for my career or reputation. "Lower your voice, Patricia. If you want to have a conversation, we can do it privately and respectfully. If you want to cause a scene, I'll call building security." "Don't you dare threaten me with security. I'm your mother, and you will treat me with respect. Sarah's daughter needs surgery next week, and your selfishness is putting a child's health at risk. What kind of person does that make you?" The emotional manipulation was expertly crafted to make me appear heartless to anyone overhearing the conversation. Patricia understood that mentioning a child's medical needs would generate sympathy for their position and judgment of my supposed callousness. "Sarah, did you tell Emma that her surgery might be delayed because of insurance problems?" I asked quietly. "No, of course not. She doesn't understand any of this adult stuff." "Then why don't we keep it that way? I'll contact the hospital directly and arrange payment for Emma's procedure. The insurance issue will be resolved without involving an 8-year-old girl in family drama." Patricia's face flushed red with anger rather than relief. "We don't want your charity, Ronald. We want you to stop this vindictive behavior and resume your family responsibilities like a mature adult." The contradiction was remarkable. They wanted my money, but not my charity. They demanded my support while rejecting my assistance. The impossible standards revealed that this confrontation was never about solving problems. It was about maintaining control and avoiding accountability for their actions. "My offer stands for Emma's medical care. Everything else remains unchanged. You made your decision Tuesday night, and I'm respecting your choice." As I walked away toward my car, Patricia called after me. "Don't think this is over. We know about Dorothy's money, and we know what you're trying to do. You won't get away with turning an old woman against her own family." The admission that they knew about Dorothy's inheritance plans confirmed everything I suspected about their motivations. This wasn't about family loyalty or even Jake's gambling debts. This was about controlling access to Dorothy's estate by eliminating me as competition for her affection and trust. That evening brought the most disturbing escalation yet. I returned to my apartment around 6:30 to find my living room window shattered and glass scattered across the floor. A brick lay among the debris, with a note wrapped around it. "Pay up or we'll collect from family assets." My hands shaking, I called 911 to report the property damage and potential threat. Officer Maria Rodriguez arrived 20 minutes later, professionally documenting the scene and taking my statement about Jake's gambling debts and the escalating family conflicts. "Mr. Thompson, have you considered that your family members might be in genuine physical danger if your brother owes money to dangerous people? Even if you're not responsible for his debts, these creditors may not make that distinction." "Officer Rodriguez, what would you recommend in this situation?" "File for a restraining order against your brother and anyone associated with his creditors. Document all threatening contact and property damage. Consider alerting other family members about potential risks, even if your relationships are strained." As she finished her report, my phone rang with a call from Sunset Manor. Dorothy's voice sounded worried but determined. "Ronald, dear, I've just spoken with Harold Brennan about our meeting Monday. He's reviewed the property transfer documents and confirmed that I can revoke Patricia's ownership based on her violation of our agreement. But he's also concerned about some inquiries his office received today from people claiming to represent creditors with potential claims against family assets." "What kind of inquiries?" "Someone called asking about the ownership status of the family home and whether it could be used as collateral for outstanding debts. Harold refused to provide any information, but he's worried that dangerous people may be researching our family's financial situation." The escalation was accelerating beyond anything I had anticipated. Jake's gambling debts weren't just threatening his safety or our family relationships. They were endangering an elderly woman who had become a target because of her property ownership. Grandma, would you be willing to consider temporary relocation until this situation resolves? Maybe a visit with Aunt Linda in Florida or Uncle Robert in Colorado? Absolutely not. I'm not running away from my home because of Jake's poor choices, but I am going to take steps to protect what needs protecting. Harold is preparing paperwork to revoke the property transfer immediately. Patricia will have 30 days to find alternative housing arrangements. The conversation was interrupted by pounding on my apartment door. Through the peephole, I could see Jake standing in the hallway, clearly agitated and possibly intoxicated again. His presence violated the informal agreement Officer Rodriguez and I had discussed about maintaining distance while I considered legal options. Ronald, open this door right now. We need to settle this tonight before things get worse for everyone. I remained silent, hoping he would leave if I didn't respond. Instead, the pounding intensified, accompanied by shouting that would certainly disturb my neighbors and potentially result in noise complaints. I know you're in there. The old lady is making things complicated with her lawyer, and now everyone's in danger because you couldn't just help family when they needed it. Open the door so we can fix this mess. The reference to Dorothy as the old lady revealed Jake's complete lack of respect for our grandmother, even as he hoped to benefit from her estate. His demand that I fix the mess he had created showed no recognition of his own responsibility for the situation. I called 911 again, reporting a potential domestic disturbance and requesting police assistance. Officer Rodriguez arrived within 15 minutes, finding Jake still pounding on my door and shouting threats about family consequences. Pues, sir, you need to step away from the door and lower your voice, she instructed firmly. Are you related to the resident of this apartment? He's my brother, and we're having a family discussion. It's none of your business. Actually, it became my business when someone reported threatening behavior and property damage. Mr. Thompson, do you want to press charges for the window incident earlier today? Looking at Jake's bloodshot eyes and desperate expression, I realized that criminal charges might push him toward even more dangerous choices. But allowing his behavior to continue unchecked was enabling the escalation that threatened everyone's safety. Officer Rodriguez, I'd like to file for a restraining order and pursue charges for the property damage. This situation needs legal boundaries before someone gets seriously hurt. As Jake was handcuffed and led away, he shouted one final threat. You just signed Dorothy's death warrant. These people don't care about collateral damage when they collect debts. Her blood will be on your hands. The words sent ice through my veins, but they also crystallized my resolve. This was no longer about family relationships or hurt feelings. This was about protecting an innocent elderly woman from the consequences of her grandson's reckless choices. Saturday morning began with a phone call that shifted my entire perspective on the crisis. Harold Brennan, Dorothy's attorney, had worked through the night researching options for protecting her from Jake's creditors while maintaining family relationships where possible. Mr. Thompson, I've discovered some concerning information about the people your brother owes money to. Based on the inquiries my office received yesterday, they appear to be connected to organized gambling operations that use aggressive collection tactics. Your grandmother's safety may be at genuine risk. What can we do legally to protect her? Several options. First, we're proceeding with revoking the property transfer to remove Patricia's ownership rights and eliminate the house as potential collateral. Second, we can establish a protective trust for Dorothy's assets that makes them inaccessible to creditors seeking payment for debts she didn't incur. Third, we can arrange temporary security monitoring for Sunset Manor to ensure her physical safety. The legal protections would cost money, but Dorothy's estate could absorb the expenses. More importantly, they would send a clear message to Jake's creditors that pursuing an elderly woman would result in expensive legal complications. Mr. Brennan, there's something else I'd like to discuss. My niece Emma needs surgery next week, and her mother's insurance lapsed because of this family conflict. I want to establish a medical trust fund specifically for the children in the family, Emma and her sister Chloe, something that provides healthcare coverage regardless of their parents' financial decisions. That's very generous considering the circumstances. We can create a restricted trust that covers medical and educational expenses for minor children in the family. The funds would be protected from creditors and couldn't be accessed for any other purposes. By noon, I had transferred $15,000 into the newly established trust fund, ironically, the exact amount Jake had requested for his supposed food truck investment. The difference was that this money would actually help family members who deserved protection rather than enabling destructive behavior. My next call went to Sunset Manor's administration office. Security Director Frank Morrison listened carefully as I explained the potential threats against Dorothy and requested enhanced monitoring of visitor access to her floor. Mr. Thompson, we take resident safety very seriously. Based on what you've described, we'll implement Level 3 security protocols immediately. All visitors will need photo identification and pre-approval from Mrs. Dorothy Thompson. We'll also station additional security personnel near her apartment during evening hours when most incidents typically occur. The afternoon brought an unexpected visitor to my apartment. Sarah stood in the hallway holding a manila envelope looking more composed than she had all week. Her expression suggested she had something important to communicate. "Ronald, may I come in? I have information you need to hear, and I think it will change how you view this whole situation." We sat in my kitchen, while Sarah carefully removed several documents from the envelope. Bank statements, credit reports, and what appeared to be loan applications spread across the table as she began explaining discoveries that had shaken her faith in our family dynamics. After Emma's surgery got threatened because of the insurance problem, I decided to investigate Jake's financial situation more thoroughly. I thought maybe I could help him organize a legitimate payment plan with his creditors that wouldn't require such a large lump sum from you. She pointed to the first bank statement dated 3 months earlier. This shows Jake received $8,000 from you in January for the photography studio investment. But look at these ATM withdrawals. $4,000 taken from casino ATMs over 2 weeks. The photography equipment was never purchased. The pattern continued through multiple statements. Every loan I had given Jake over the past year had been converted into cash within days and spent at various gambling establishments throughout the county. The lawn care equipment, the online retail inventory, the business licenses, none of it had ever existed. "Sarah, how did you get access to Jake's banking information?" "He asked me to co-sign for a credit card application last week, claiming he needed to establish business credit for the food truck venture. When I reviewed his financial disclosure requirements, I discovered he's been lying about everything for months. The credit report revealed debts I hadn't known existed. Jake owed money to 6 different casinos, 3 online gambling sites, and several individual creditors who appeared to be loan sharks based on their interest rates and collection methods. Here, the total debt is actually $62,000, not the $37,000 his creditors mentioned to you. He's been trying to manage multiple payment schedules by borrowing from dangerous people to pay safer creditors, creating a pyramid of debt that's completely unsustainable. Why are you showing me this information?" "Because I realized Patricia and Jake manipulated me into supporting their plan to cut you off from the family. They convinced me that you were becoming controlling and that forcing independence would be healthier for everyone. But they never mentioned Jake's gambling addiction or the extent of his financial problems. They certainly didn't explain that your refusal to enable his addiction might actually save his life." Sarah's revelation shifted my understanding of her role in the family meeting. Rather than being a willing participant in my exclusion, she had been another victim of Patricia and Jake's manipulation used as emotional leverage because of her daughter's dependency on my insurance support. "There's more," she continued, pulling out what appeared to be a handwritten letter. "I found this in Jake's car when I borrowed it yesterday. It's addressed to Dorothy, but never sent. The letter written in Jake's messy handwriting was a desperate plea for Dorothy to loan him $50,000 against his expected inheritance. The tone was manipulative and self-pitying, describing his gambling as a medical condition that required family understanding rather than judgment. Most disturbing was his suggestion that Dorothy could help him without telling other family members, implying that secrecy would protect everyone from unnecessary drama. Jake was planning to manipulate Grandma into giving him money without anyone else knowing. When I confronted him about this letter, he admitted that cutting you off from the family was partly about eliminating your influence over Dorothy's financial decisions. The systematic nature of the deception was breathtaking. Jake had orchestrated my exclusion, not just to pressure me into supporting his gambling, but also to clear the path for exploiting Dorothy's affection and trust. Patricia had been complicit in the plan, either knowingly or through willful ignorance of Jake's true motivations. Sarah, what changed your mind about supporting their decision? Yesterday, when Emma asked why Uncle Ronald wasn't coming to Grandma Dorothy's birthday party, I realized I couldn't explain the situation to an 8-year-old because none of it made sense when I tried to put it into simple terms. If I couldn't justify our actions to a child, maybe the actions themselves were wrong. That evening, as I reviewed the evidence Sarah had provided, my phone rang with a call from Dorothy. Her voice carried a mixture of sadness and determination that I had never heard before. "Ronald, dear Patricia came to visit me today. She tried to convince me that Jake's problems were caused by your refusal to help the family during a crisis. She suggested that changing my estate plans might encourage you to reconsider your selfish behavior." "What did you tell her?" "I told her that anyone who would use a grandmother's inheritance as a weapon against family members had revealed their true character. Then I called Harold Brennan and instructed him to prepare new estate documents that reflect my current understanding of who deserves my trust and support." The conversation was interrupted by a call on my other line. Unknown number, but given the week's events, I felt compelled to answer. The voice was unfamiliar but professional with an edge that suggested serious business. "Mr. Thompson, this is Detective Ray Castellanos with the County Sheriff's Financial Crimes Unit. We've been investigating illegal gambling operations in the area, and your brother Jake's name has come up in our inquiries. We'd like to schedule a meeting to discuss his situation and potential cooperation with our investigation." The revelation that Jake's gambling debts involved operations under criminal investigation added another layer of complexity to an already dangerous situation. But it also offered hope that law enforcement intervention might resolve the threats against family members without requiring continued financial enabling. "Detective Castellanos, I'd be very interested in meeting with you. There are safety concerns involving elderly family members that may be relevant to your investigation." As I scheduled the meeting for Monday morning, I realized that Jake's destructive choices had inadvertently created an opportunity for justice. Instead of being pressured into perpetual financial support for his gambling addiction, I could help law enforcement address the criminal enterprises that preyed on vulnerable people like my brother. The irony wasn't lost on me. By refusing to enable Jake's self-destruction, I might actually be saving him from consequences far worse than family disappointment. Monday morning's meeting with Detective Castellanos took place in a small conference room at the Sheriff's Department, where fluorescent lighting created shadows that seemed appropriate for discussing family secrets and criminal investigations. "Mr. Thompson, we've been monitoring illegal gambling operations that use violence and property destruction to collect debts from addicted gamblers. Your brother Jake has accumulated substantial obligations to these organizations, and we believe they may be targeting family members to pressure payment." Detective Castellanos spread photographs across the table showing various gambling establishments that operated outside legal regulations. Jake appeared in several surveillance photos, sometimes winning, but more often clearly losing large amounts of money. "Our investigation has identified a network of loan sharks who specifically target gambling addicts with high-interest loans that become impossible to repay. They encourage continued gambling by offering additional credit, then use threats against family members when the debts become unmanageable. What kind of threats are we talking about? Property damage, harassment of elderly relatives, threats against children, and in extreme cases, physical violence. The broken window at your apartment fits the pattern we've documented with other families. The detective explained that law enforcement needed cooperation from family members to build cases against these criminal enterprises. Jake's gambling addiction had made him both a victim and a potential witness in their investigation. If your brother agrees to testify about their collection methods and provide evidence of their illegal activities, we can offer him protection from retaliation and assistance with addiction treatment. However, family members need to understand that continuing to pay his gambling debts would actually obstruct our investigation. The revelation transformed my refusal to enable Jake's addiction from family cruelty into law enforcement cooperation. By maintaining firm boundaries around financial support, I had inadvertently created conditions that would help authorities address the criminal organizations threatening vulnerable people throughout the community. Detective Castellanos, what about protection for my grandmother? She's 89 years old and owns property that these people may view as potential collateral. We can arrange discreet security monitoring and provide panic button devices for elderly family members. We've found that most gambling debt collectors avoid targeting senior citizens when they know law enforcement is actively monitoring the situation. Tuesday brought news that Patricia had retained a family law attorney to challenge Dorothy's decision to revoke the property transfer. The legal maneuvering revealed how desperately she wanted to maintain control over assets that could potentially satisfy Jake's debts or provide financial security for her own future. Harold Brennan called with updates on the legal proceedings. Patricia is claiming that Dorothy lacks the mental capacity to make significant financial decisions and that you've been manipulating an elderly woman for personal gain. She's requesting a court-ordered competency evaluation and temporary injunction against any changes to estate documents. Is Dorothy's mental capacity actually questionable? Not remotely. I've worked with her for 15 years and her cognitive abilities remain sharp. The competency evaluation will actually strengthen her position by providing professional documentation of her mental acuity. Wednesday afternoon brought an unexpected visitor to my office. Lisa, Jake's girlfriend, who had broken up with me 2 years earlier, appeared in the lobby requesting a private conversation. Her nervous demeanor and expensive jewelry suggested she had information that might be valuable. Ronald, I need to tell you something about Jake's gambling that you probably don't know. Something that might help you understand why he's become so desperate recently. We found privacy in the same conference room where I had spoken with Sarah days earlier. Lisa's revelations would prove more shocking than anything I had discovered so far. Jake's gambling addiction started about 6 months after you and I broke up. He was angry about losing the relationship and started drinking heavily. The drinking led to casino visits that gradually became compulsive behavior. Why are you telling me this now? Because I've been dating Jake for 8 months, and I recently discovered he's been using information about your family's finances to calculate how much money he could potentially access through manipulation or pressure. He knew about Dorothy's inheritance plans months ago and has been planning ways to position himself as her primary beneficiary. Lisa produced text message screenshots that documented Jake's calculating approach to family relationships. Messages to her describing strategies for isolating me from family events. Plans for convincing Dorothy that I was becoming mentally unstable and shouldn't inherit substantial assets. Even discussions about how to use Sarah's daughters as emotional leverage to pressure my compliance with his financial demands. Lisa, why did you participate in these conversations? Why didn't you warn anyone about his plans? Honestly, because I was angry with you for how our relationship ended. I thought helping Jake get money from your family was a way to hurt you for rejecting me. But watching him destroy everyone's lives for gambling money has shown me what kind of person he really is and what kind of person I became by supporting him. The admission of her vindictive motivations was painful, but her decision to come forward suggested genuine remorse and desire to prevent further damage to innocent family members. Nah, there's more you need to know. Jake has been researching Dorothy's medical history and life insurance policies. He's made comments about how her death would solve everyone's financial problems by providing immediate access to inheritance money. The implication sent ice through my veins. Jake's gambling addiction and desperation had progressed to the point where he was considering Dorothy's death as a solution to his debt problems. Lisa, are you saying Jake might actually harm our grandmother? I'm saying he's desperate enough to consider options that a rational person would never contemplate. When someone owes $60,000 to dangerous people and believes an elderly relative is the only source of salvation, their judgment becomes severely compromised. Thursday brought validation for Detective Castellanos' investigation. Jake was arrested at a casino while meeting with known loan sharks, caught on surveillance cameras, accepting additional high-interest loans, despite his existing debt burden. The arrest provided law enforcement with evidence of the criminal lending practices they needed to build their case. Patricia called me that evening, her voice breaking with emotion. Ronald Jake has been arrested, and the police are saying he might go to prison unless he cooperates with their investigation. They're also saying that continuing to pay his gambling debts could be considered obstruction of justice. Are you finally ready to admit that refusing to enable his addiction was the right decision? I'm ready to admit that I made terrible mistakes in judgment, that I let fear and desperation cloud my thinking about what was best for the family. Jake's attorney says cooperation with law enforcement is his only chance to avoid serious prison time. Friday morning brought the news I'd been hoping for. Sarah called with an update that represented the first genuine progress since this crisis began. Ronald Jake has agreed to enter voluntary addiction treatment as part of a cooperation agreement with the police. He's also agreed to provide testimony about the loan sharks who threatened family members. But most importantly, he asked me to tell you that he's sorry for the damage he's caused and that he understands why you refuse to enable his gambling. The apology was secondhand and probably motivated by legal necessity rather than genuine remorse, but it represented acknowledgement of responsibility that hadn't existed before. The detective says the criminal investigation should wrap up within a few months, and the security threats against Dorothy and the rest of the family should end once Jake's testimony helps convict the loan sharks. That afternoon, Dorothy called with news that would reshape our family's future. Ronald, dear, I've completed the competency evaluation that Patricia requested. The psychologist confirmed that my mental abilities are excellent for someone my age. More importantly, the evaluation process helped me understand how badly Patricia has been manipulating family relationships to serve her own interests. What happens now with the legal proceedings? Patricia's attorney has advised her to drop the challenges to my estate planning decisions. Apparently, the competency evaluation results make their case impossible to win. Harold is preparing final documents that will protect my assets from any future attempts at manipulation or coercion. As I hung up the phone, I realized that Jake's destructive choices had inadvertently exposed the toxic dynamics that had been damaging our family for years. Patricia's manipulation, his gambling addiction, Sarah's passive compliance, all of it had been brought into the light where it could finally be addressed honestly. The price for this clarity had been high, but the alternative, continued enabling of destructive behavior, would have been far more costly in the long term. 6 months later, autumn sunlight streamed through the windows of my new house as I prepared for Dorothy's 91st birthday celebration. The modest 3-bedroom home represented more than just a change of address. It symbolized the healthy boundaries and authentic relationships that had emerged from the chaos of that terrible week in spring. Jake stood in my kitchen sober for 4 months and working as a counselor at the addiction treatment facility where he had spent 12 weeks confronting the gambling compulsion that nearly destroyed our family. His appearance had transformed dramatically. The bloodshot eyes and desperate expression had been replaced by clarity and purposeful determination. Ronald, I know I can never fully repair the damage I caused, but I want you to know that refusing to enable my gambling probably saved my life. The detective told me that people who owe the kind of money I owed often end up seriously injured or worse when they can't pay. His recovery had been genuine rather than convenient. Jake attended meetings daily, sponsored newer members of the program, and worked full-time at a job that barely covered his basic expenses while he slowly repaid legitimate debts. The transformation wasn't complete. Addiction recovery was an ongoing process, but his commitment to change appeared authentic. Jake, what matters now is that you continue making good choices going forward. The past can't be changed, but the future is still within your control. Sarah arrived with Emma and Chloe, both girls healthy and happy, after successfully navigating the medical crisis that had seemed so overwhelming months earlier. Sarah's transformation had been equally remarkable. She had used the experience as motivation to develop genuine financial independence, rather than relying on family assistance. Uncle Ronald, look what I drew for Great-Grandma Dorothy's birthday. Emma announced, displaying a crayon masterpiece depicting our entire family around a large birthday cake. Notably, everyone was smiling and holding hands in her artistic interpretation of family harmony. It's beautiful, Emma. I'm sure she'll love it. Sarah had enrolled in evening classes to complete her nursing degree, supported by the Medical Trust Fund that now provided healthcare coverage for both daughters, while their mother built career stability. The trust had grown beyond my initial contribution through careful investment, ensuring educational opportunities for the girls, regardless of future family financial fluctuations. Ronald, I can never adequately express my gratitude for protecting Emma and Chloe during the worst period of my judgment, Sarah said quietly, while the girls explored my backyard. Watching you maintain your integrity, while everyone else lost perspective, taught me what real strength looks like. Patricia arrived last, carrying Dorothy's favorite flowers and a wrapped gift that appeared to be a photo album. Her relationship with me remained tentative, but showed genuine signs of improvement based on mutual respect rather than financial dependency. Ronald, I've spent months thinking about how to apologize for the way I treated you, how I allowed fear about financial security to override my love for my son, how I participated in Jake's manipulation without questioning his motives or considering the consequences for innocent people. Her transformation had been the most difficult to accept because her role in the manipulation had been so calculated and deliberate. But Patricia had committed to therapy sessions that helped her understand how her own financial anxieties had made her vulnerable to Jake's schemes. Patricia, what's important is that you recognize how those choices affected everyone and that you're committed to different behavior going forward. I am committed. I found a full-time position at an insurance company that provides enough income to support myself without depending on anyone else. Living independently has been challenging, but it's also been liberating in ways I didn't expect. The birthday party itself took place in Dorothy's apartment at Sunset Manor, beautifully decorated by the staff who had grown genuinely fond of their sharp-witted, generous-hearted resident. Security Director Frank Morrison had become a regular companion for Dorothy's daily walks, their friendship blossoming after months of professional interaction during the threat assessment period. Frank, you must try the apple pie that Sarah made specifically for today. Dorothy insisted with the authoritative tone that made her requests sound like royal commands. She's been perfecting the recipe for weeks. At 89 turning 91, Dorothy remained the family's emotional anchor, but her approach to relationships had been refined by recent experiences. She now demanded authenticity and reciprocity in family interactions rather than accepting superficial pleasantries that masked underlying dysfunction. Before we cut the cake, I want to share some thoughts about this past year and the changes our family has experienced. Dorothy announced with the ceremonial gravity of someone who understood the significance of milestone birthdays. She stood with surprising steadiness, holding a prepared speech that she had obviously crafted carefully. 12 months ago, I thought family loyalty meant accepting whatever behavior people chose to display regardless of how destructive or hurtful it might be. I thought love required enabling poor choices and ignoring manipulation because maintaining harmony seemed more important than demanding honesty. The room grew quiet as everyone recognized this would be a defining moment in our family's evolution. This year taught me that real love sometimes requires boundaries, that authentic relationships demand mutual respect and genuine care for each other's well-being, that enabling someone's self-destructive behavior isn't kindness. It's actually a form of cruelty that prevents them from learning and growing. Dorothy turned toward me with an expression of pride and affection that felt both familiar and newly earned. Ronald, your courage in maintaining your integrity during our family's darkest period showed everyone what principled behavior looks like. Your refusal to enable Jake's gambling addiction ultimately saved him from consequences that could have been tragic. She continued around the room, addressing each family member with specific observations about their growth and transformation over the past months. Patricia, your commitment to financial independence and emotional honesty has shown me that people can change when they choose to face difficult truths about themselves. Sarah, watching you build stability for your daughters while supporting Jake's recovery has demonstrated what real strength and compassion look like. Finally, she turned to Jake with an expression that combined disappointment with cautious hope. Jake, your addiction caused tremendous pain for everyone who loves you, but your willingness to seek treatment and make amends has shown that redemption is possible when someone commits fully to change. 2. As we shared cake and watched Emma and Chloe play games with their great-grandmother, I reflected on how profoundly our family dynamics had shifted. The crisis had stripped away pretenses and revealed everyone's true character, but it had also created opportunities for authentic relationships based on mutual respect rather than financial dependency. My phone buzzed with a text message from Amy, the elementary school teacher I had been dating for 3 months. Her message was simple but meaningful. Hope Dorothy's party is wonderful. Looking forward to meeting her soon. Amy represented the possibility of building relationships based on shared values and genuine connection rather than family obligation or financial convenience. She knew about my family's recent struggles and respected the boundaries I had established to protect my own well-being while remaining open to reconciliation based on authentic change. As the party wound down and family members prepared to leave, Dorothy asked me to stay for a private conversation. We sat on her balcony, overlooking the gardens, where she spent her mornings reading and reflecting on the changes in her life and relationships. Ronald, I want you to know that the estate planning decisions I made during our crisis weren't motivated by anger or disappointment in other family members. They were based on my recognition of who had consistently demonstrated integrity, responsibility, and genuine care for others' well-being. Grandma, I hope you know that I never expected or felt entitled to inherit anything from you. The support I provided to the family was given freely because I believed it was the right thing to do. That's exactly why you deserve to inherit what I've worked to build over my lifetime. Not because you expected it, but because you never expected it. Not because you demanded recognition, but because you never demanded recognition. She handed me an envelope containing copies of her updated estate documents legally finalized the previous week, after all challenges had been withdrawn. The house, the investment accounts, the life insurance policies. All of it will come to you when the time comes. But more importantly, you'll inherit the responsibility of maintaining healthy family relationships based on the principles you've demonstrated this year. 2 weeks later, I received the news that Dorothy had passed away peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by the photo albums and memory books that documented a life well lived. Her funeral brought together relatives from across the country who shared stories of her wisdom, generosity, and unwavering commitment to family values. The reading of her will contained no surprises. Everything proceeded exactly as she had explained during our final private conversation, but attached to the legal documents was a personal letter addressed to the entire family, read aloud by Harold Brennan in his office conference room. To my beloved family, the inheritance I leave behind represents more than money or property. It represents the values of integrity, responsibility, and authentic love that I hope will guide your relationships for generations to come. Ronald has demonstrated these values consistently, which is why I've entrusted him with the stewardship of what I've built. But I expect him to use this inheritance in ways that support the continued growth and healing of our family, provided that growth and healing are genuine rather than convenient. The letter continued with specific guidance about how the inheritance should support family members who demonstrated ongoing commitment to positive change, while maintaining boundaries against manipulation or exploitation. 1 year after the devastating text message that began this journey, our family gathered for Thanksgiving dinner at my house. The same house Dorothy had willed to me, where Patricia had once lived, where Jake had once expected to inherit a share. The gathering was smaller than previous years, including only family members who had earned their place through authentic relationship building rather than automatic entitlement. Jake arrived with his sponsor, a gentleman named Marcus, who had helped him navigate the most difficult aspects of addiction recovery. Sarah brought her daughters and her new boyfriend, a teacher who shared her commitment to education and stability. Patricia came alone but seemed more relaxed and confident than I had seen her in years. As we shared the meal Sarah and I had prepared together, I realized that the painful process of establishing boundaries had created space for relationships based on choice rather than obligation. We were together because we wanted to be, not because family guilt or financial dependency demanded it. Emma, now 9 years old and thriving in school, asked the question that perfectly captured the transformation our family had experienced. "Uncle Ronald, why is this Thanksgiving so much more fun than the old ones? Everyone seems happier." Before I could respond, Jake answered with the wisdom of someone who had learned hard lessons about authenticity and accountability. "Because everyone here chose to be here, Emma. We're not together because we have to be. We're together because we want to be. That makes all the difference." The simple truth of his observation resonated through the room, capturing the essence of what healthy relationships required: mutual choice, respect, and commitment to each other's genuine well-being. As the evening ended and family members prepared to return to their own homes and lives, I felt deep satisfaction in knowing that Dorothy's legacy lived on through relationships built on the foundation of integrity and authentic love she had modeled throughout her life. The inheritance she left me was substantial, but the values she taught through her example were invaluable. Those values would guide my stewardship of family resources and relationships for the rest of my life, ensuring that future generations understood the difference between love and enabling, between loyalty and manipulation, between family harmony and family health. Looking back on that devastating Tuesday night when everything changed, I realized that the text message banning me from family gatherings had actually been a gift. It forced me to examine the difference between being needed and being valued, between financial dependency and emotional connection, between maintaining peace and demanding respect. The family that emerged from that crisis was stronger, healthier, and more authentic than what we had before. We had learned that sometimes you have to be willing to lose people temporarily to discover who truly values your presence in their lives. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who were taking advantage of your generosity? How did you find the courage to prioritize your own well-being when others tried to make you feel guilty for protecting yourself? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might help someone else who's struggling with similar family dynamics. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button to show your support. Subscribe for more stories about overcoming family challenges and building healthy relationships. And don't forget to share this with anyone who might need to hear that it's okay to set boundaries even with people you love. Thank you for joining me on this journey of discovery about the difference between enabling and empowering, between giving up and setting boundaries. Remember that true love sometimes requires saying no, and the people who genuinely care about you will eventually understand and respect the limits you need to set for your own well-being. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and remember that you can't pour from an empty cup. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is to take care of yourself first.